the Dialed In Angling podcast presented by Onyx Fish, Runnings, Arneson's Rocky Point Resort, Visit Watertown, South Dakota, Mantrap Lake Lodge, and Visit Cook County. Well, this week, if you listened or tuned into last week's podcast, talked about our adventures for this week, I couldn't be more excited. Heading up to the big lake, the Lake Gitchee Gumee, Lake Superior, whatever you want to call it. You know, I grew up about 40 minutes south of Lake Superior. You know, over the years, Lake Superior has always been sort of this big mystery to me. It's been a lake where it just seemed way too intimidating, even as I grew older and into a guide. I just haven't done a ton of fishing on Lake Superior. I've gone out on a couple charters. You know, my in-laws used to have a boat on Lake Superior, so we used to go up there and take that out every once in a while, stumble into the occasional lake trout. Really didn't know what we were doing. I mean, back then, we just kind of put the downriggers down, sort of trolled, had some spoons out, try to keep our depths, somewhat in conjunction with the bottom. But really, I mean, Lake Superior has always been this sort of big mystery. It's been a lake that, I'll frequent on very, very few occasions where I'll go once every 10 years or something like that. But it's always been a lake that I've been intrigued by. Over the past decade, for sure, I've been hearing more and more reports about how the fishing's been getting better. The lake trout fishing has been getting better. I know a couple years ago in March, I was up in Duluth for a kids' basketball game, and I drove by kind of London Road right by Marine General, and I could see a ton of boats out there trolling in March and April, and boats everywhere, and I could tell there was people catching fish. And so, I was at the Northwest Sports Show. I remember talking to Russ there from Marine General and asking him, like, what are they catching? And cohos. They're catching tons of cohos. And then, of course, ice fishing on Lake Superior, that only happens once every 10 years when it freezes over, especially on the North Shore on the main lake. They do a little more fishing over there in Bayfield and Ashland on the South Shore. But as far as the main lake freezing, it just doesn't happen that often. Even last year with the, pretty much normal winter we had, didn't have much ice on Lake Superior. It remained open. And, so that's always been something that I've been intrigued by. I've talked about doing it. I have a lot of buddies that fish the South Shore and the North Shore. And so this year, I've had a game plan of, just going out there at some point, whether I'm fishing up on the North Shore, the South Shore, whatever. I was just like, I got to get out to Lake Superior. Fast forward to this summer, and I started following this individual on Facebook, Instagram. His name's Ethan from Lake Superior Jigging, and I'm just seeing the amount of lake trout he's catching and the posts that he's putting up, the videos, and it sort of piqued my interest. I follow a lot of different fishing sort of anglers, guides, whatever. I'm on social media a lot in that sense. When I'm not fishing, I'm thinking about fishing a lot, not a whole lot different than a lot of our listeners out there. And so all summer long, I've been kind of following this Ethan and his story. As a matter of fact, my buddy Phil Jensen, who we've talked about on the podcast. He's been on the podcast. He lives out in Otter Tail. When we were out there for Lund Mania, Phil was talking about fishing with Ethan back in April and what a great experience it was. Ethan has sort of carved out this niche up there where, he's jigging for lake trout. He specifically targets lake trout jigging with forward-facing sonar. It started out, he used 2D sonar, and you'd sort of, just drop right below the boat and fish below your transducer like you're ice fishing. I've done that a lot in Canada. I love jigging for lake trout. It's one of the species that I absolutely love chasing on ice, but also in open water. Fell in love with it being up in Canada, catching lake trout. It seems like, you're almost doing like a walleye style jigging, but those fish are aggressive. And if you've ever caught a lake trout jigging, you're hooked for life, right? And so seeing all of Ethan's posts from from social media and seeing it. He posts, almost daily as far as following him on Instagram. If you want to follow him, it's Lake Superior Jigging. So I was like, you know what? I got to get my son Robbie up there. Robbie and I tend to do a lot of fishing trips together all over the country. We've gone to Central America, South America. We've gone to Canada, Alaska. I love showing him different fishing experiences. And the more that I started following Ethan from Lake Superior Jigging, I was like, we got to do it. We got to go up there and experience it. And so this week we did it. We, booked a trip a while back with Ethan. He was nice enough to sort of carve out a date for us to come up there. I know he's extremely busy, but he's got a cool story as well. He sort of built this category for himself and sort of found his own way. Talking to Ethan, we're going to interview him, and he really wanted to be a fishing guy, didn't know where he wanted to go, and so we're going to sit down with Ethan after fishing. He's nice enough to agree to jump on the podcast and sort of tell his story. So I'll let him talk about, how he kind of found this niche and this way of guiding and chartering to make a living. And he's very successful at it. And so I'm super pumped to get up there and fish with him. I love lake trout fishing. Lake Superior is not very far from where I live right now. I can't wait to get up there. I've been having some sleepless nights thinking about getting up there because, I've talked on the podcast before. If I'm not fishing for what I'm doing for a career, I'm always seeking out new fishing experiences. My son and I like to experiment on new lakes. We like to try new species. We like to go after things that sort of are outside of our proverbial radar. I talked about it last week about things that were on my radar. This is on my list. I want to get up there, want to get after it with Ethan. I'm super excited to do so. Even though Lake Superior is a little bit overwhelming for me in the sense where I've been out there on some really, really rough days, right? Where that lake can get angry quickly. But going with a guide is the best way to do it. I fish all over the country. I fish all over the planet if I can. The places I've been, I almost always hire a guide. Even though I could DIY my way through some of these fishing experiences, always hire a guide because it shortens that learning curve. And I tell my customers the same thing. If you're going on vacation somewhere, if you're going to a new area, even if you have a boat, if you're going to vacation there, hire a guide the first day. They're going to cut that learning curve in half for you. And it's not just about the spots. It's about how they go about it, what they're looking for, how they're fishing, the way that they run their boat control, just everything about every aspect of that fishing experience. I think about it in saltwater a lot. The first time I went saltwater fishing, or I would say the first few times I went saltwater fishing, it was always trolling, right? We always went trolling for marlin. We trolled for dorado, mahi-mahi, that sort of thing. It was always kind of a trolling deal. And it wasn't until I started casting with charters and I started fishing inshore stuff where I was like, you know what? This is what I dig. I love casting for fish, catching tarpon on light tackle, catching snook, catching redfish. And I've gone all over doing it, and I usually seek out those charters that are doing that. Nothing against the trollers. It's just that's the way I like to fish. And same for Lake Superior. All of my experiences on Lake Superior have been on charters and trolling, right? Going up on my in-laws' boat, trolling. And it was fun. We caught fish. Nothing against trolling. I've been out to Lake Michigan and had some phenomenal experiences trolling. So, but I just wanted to try something different for this experience. Not to say that I'm not going to go back up there, and there's plenty of great charters on Lake Superior, that's for sure. I know there's a lot of captains that are doing really, really well. The fishing has gotten a lot better than when I was a kid. When I was a kid, everybody went to Lake Michigan because the fishing was so much better than Lake Superior. That's starting to change. They've got a phenomenal lake trout fishery up there. They've got a ton of cohos. Steelhead, everything seems to be coming back. The smelt runs, I don't know if you've heard over the last couple of years, we've had really, really good smelt runs, almost to the point where it was like when I was a kid. I remember people going up there and smelting and filling, garbage cans full of smelt in one evening. And that sort of seems to be the case again. There's tons of people up there smelting. I know a lot of my friends that went up there this spring were like, man, it's like the old days. So it's good to hear that Lake Superior is as healthy as it is. And I'm excited to get up there. And I'm excited to get up there to do a new experience. And that's jigging for lake trout. Stay tuned. We're going to have more from Dialed In Angling. We're going to talk about our adventure. I'm going to interview Ethan. And I can't tell you how pumped I am to do this podcast from Lake Gitchee Gumee. So stay tuned. We got more Dialed In Angling coming your way.
onX Fish is the best tool I have ever used for finding new lakes to target. Download the app today to get fisheries information in the state of Minnesota and Wisconsin, along with research tools for serious anglers and beginners alike. Filter lakes by species, trophy only, keeper fish, abundance, or all of the above. Plan which lakes to fish with the app, navigate to the accesses, and once you're there, use the onX best-in-class weather imagery and fishing hotspots to catch more fish. onX Fish is a phenomenal tool both on and off the water for discovering new fishing opportunities, many of which you would never known existed. onX Fish, the app that is changing the game on ice.
Visit Cook County, Minnesota, a year-round fishing destination like no other. Spring brings steelhead and smelt runs along the Lake Superior shoreline. In summer, cast for walleye, lake trout, and northern pike in the region's inland lakes and rivers. As the leaves change, so does the fishing, with fall offering some of the best lake trout action around. When winter settles in, grab your gear and head out for ice fishing in a true northern wilderness setting. Whether you're an experienced angler or just discovering the joy of casting a line, Cook County has a spot and a season for you. Learn more and start planning your fishing trip at visitcookcounty.com.
Arneson's Rocky Point Resort in northern Minnesota offers a little something for everyone. Nestled on Lake of the Woods' South Shore, it provides easy access to 14 remarkable reefs. Serious anglers know that Arneson's offers some of the best fishing, charter fishing, and small boat fishing options, all supported by the largest protected marina on the lake's South Shore. Accommodation selections range from 1 to 5 bedrooms. Equipped with all the modern conveniences, guests can enjoy a delightful dining experience and stunning lake views at the Rock Harbor Lodge, an on-site, full-service bar and restaurant. The two beaches provide hours of fun for the whole family. Whether you're seeking an idyllic fishing spot or a relaxing vacation, Arneson's Rocky Point has everything you need. Check them out at arnesonsresort.com. Okay, my guest is Ethan Waytashek, Lake Superior Jigging. We just got off the boat with Ethan. It was a phenomenal experience. Going out jigging lake trout. If you've never jigged for lake trout, first of all, it is one of the funnest things you can do on the planet, fishing. I guarantee it. But Ethan has really carved out his own niche as far as making a name for himself, a guide service, creating a whole category, jigging with live scopes and going out and getting after it. And not only just jigging for them, just absolutely crushing them. Ethan, welcome to the podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Hey, I want to get a little bit of backstory on you because I know you're from Brainerd. You've done a ton of fishing your whole life. You know, I found out about you through some friends that have fished with you, but also Jason Barr in Brainerd told me about you as well. And I've been following you on social media. And I was like, you know what? I got to get up there and fish with Ethan. Ethan, you know, how did you get your start fishing, first of all? And then how did you get to this where you're jigging lake trout and you're making a living doing it and you're taking tons of people out fishing and sort of created your own category?
So I started out growing up on the boat and got hooked on fishing, and it kind of carried on through my whole life. High school, we would always fish the Mississippi River right in Brainerd below the high school because it was right there, and crushed smallmouth down there all through high school. And I kind of knew I wanted to be a fishing guide someday, but just didn't know where or what. And a few years went by, and then I had a guy take me out trolling in Duluth for free on Lake Superior. caught my first lake trout ever. And I kind of had the fascination of the big water and kind of got hooked to that. And then we had ice for about 4 years there in Duluth and jigged the Lakers every day that I could on the ice, and eventually got my own boat. And then through YouTube watching Grant on Superior Angling, and then just a lot of trial and error and getting skunked, I eventually got better and better at jigging lake trout and finally got the hook on it and then took off from there.
Heck yeah. I mean, that's the thing. It's not like, fishing Pelican Lake in Brainerd, right? It's not like fishing Gull Lake. It's Lake Superior, dude. And there is a learning curve there. And for you to go from, a Brainerd kid and to come up here and not run a charter business where you're out trolling and running big boats, you came out here and started getting after it jigging. When was like a light bulb moment for you where you're just like, this is it. This is how I do it. You don't have to get into details about, how you did it, but like you talk about the learning curve. Like, were you out here just kind of hunting and pecking and all of a sudden you just landed on them and you started just drilling them, or how did that whole thing come about?
The first time, we had a lot of times of trying and getting skunked. And then the first most memorable experience I got was up by Silver Bay. We were out in like 242 feet of water, and me and my buddy, we slammed a bunch of Siskoets, which they're not the best eating, but at the time it was the coolest thing ever because we slammed them. And then it just took off from there. That kind of gave me a hint into what I needed to do. And then, the next fall, I kind of figured it out, and through pictures that I was posting and everything like that, I realized how big a thing I had going on. And this was before live scope, but we were just catching some amazing fish and it was impressing a lot of people. So it kind of showed me that this was the way to go.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, you want to talk about electronic fishing, prior to live scope, a lot of people would just jig on 2D sonar. That's how I always jigged lake trout before I had a live scope or a forward facing sonar is, you drop your jig down below your transducer and you're basically video gaming or ice fishing, much like you would ice fishing. And that's how I fell in love with lake trout fishing, was just doing that. And not just on Lake Superior in Canada. Most of my lake trout experiences have always been in Canada, like where we absolutely whaled on them. But to come out to Lake Superior doing that, and then fast forward you getting a forward facing sonar, how did that kind of evolve into this whole category that you got going on now? Because let me tell you, we just got off the water on Lake Superior and we absolutely whomped the lake trout with Ethan. And dude, you got it dialed in. I mean, you absolutely have this dialed in. Kind of walk me through that when you first got your live scope. There's a little bit of a learning curve there, right? I mean, even with me guiding when I got my live scope, it took me a little bit before I really started finding that groove.
Yeah, I mean, definitely takes a learning curve, but I think the thing it helps with the most with vertical fishing is like if you got a current, like today we had a little bit of a southwest current, it helps with being able to see that jig outside of under the boat, whereas 2D, you would lose that and then you're just guessing or you're not seeing anything, you're just pounding bottom. So it helps in that standpoint, the biggest, I think.
Yeah, I mean, the current definitely, you could tell as that wind started coming up, our lines started going out further and you're able to follow our jigs around, follow the fish around. I just love the way lake trout react to baits, right? I mean, even more so, I spend so much time walleye fishing and bass fishing, and I do love the triggering fish. I mean, that's what's fun about fishing with forward-facing sonar is you can trigger those fish and you can see how they react to your baits. Those lake trout are just a different animal. I mean, the way they reacted to it, and as we're reeling up the baits and stuff, as they're just like, you can tell them kind of put on the afterburners and come after it. It's exciting, man. I can't think of another way of jigging a species of fish that would be more exciting than what we did today, other than maybe saltwater. I mean, they put on the afterburners and those fish come alive.
Yeah, it's definitely Yeah, the only thing that compares is saltwater amberjack fishing. That's both the only thing that can chase like that. I mean, these fish are chasing, 100+ feet all on their own, fully willing, trying to eat. They're hungry.
And what's cool about you too is like, you fish all over, right? Lake Superior jigging. I mean, Ethan is traveling all over the place. He's fishing the North Shore. He's fishing the South Shore. You go into Michigan, Wisconsin, Minnesota. I mean, that's a lot as a fishing guide to kind of undertake and understand all of those different bodies of water, where to launch, where to go from there. I mean, you got to spend a lot of time on the water to get to that point. When did you say, you know what, I can't fish the north end because of the wind, so I'm going to go to the South Shore? I mean, how did that whole thing come about for you?
I think for me, it's just the chase and the adventure of trying new places, new spots, seeing new fish. You just constantly have that drive to go somewhere new, and there's a lot of days, do a trip, then you got a 6-hour drive, sleep in the truck, and then do another trip. And then you got to do a 6-hour drive all the way back around the lake to do another trip back in Minnesota. So, but you got to chase the fish, and, it depends on clients too, what they're looking for. The Michigan end is more trophy size fish, whereas the North Shore is a lot more average size fish, other than a few certain times a year you get the bigger ones. But the South end is definitely better for big fish.
That's cool. I mean, Lake Superior is no joke. I mean, just being out there, we weren't that far off ashore today, but looking across the lake, I mean, it's just this vast, giant fishery that seems untouched. Even though I grew up, 40 minutes from Lake Superior, it was always just kind of that big monster that I would dabble in. I did fish Lake Superior growing up, more in the St. Louis River fishing walleyes. But I did come out trolling for lake trout and that sort of thing, and fished a lot over in Lake Michigan, and did some salmon and lake trout fishing. But what you do is definitely way more intriguing to me, and definitely more on my style of fishing, just the way you go about it and how you go about finding these fish. I mean, just running them down. That's what I love doing. That's what makes me get up in the morning. I mean, the pot of coffee's up in the morning. I can see with the intrigue of being able to fish the North Shore, the South Shore, Minnesota, Wisconsin, Michigan. That's cool, man. I mean, what you're doing is definitely unique. I think listeners, if you're listening to this, if you have any inkling of jigging for lake trout, or ever wanted to try just fishing Lake Superior, I would definitely steer people to go your route and look up Ethan, Lake Superior jigging. It's definitely a fun way to go about coming out here on Lake Superior and fishing. Because like I told you before, I mean, yes, going out with the charter is great. Nothing against charter captains. They make their living out there trolling. But for me, I love jigging lake trout. I always have. I mean, ever since I caught my first lake trout, I'm hooked, because it's like fishing walleyes on steroids. So even if you're a walleye angler that loves jig fishing, this style of fishing is for you, and you got to look up Ethan. Ethan, as you look forward into the season here, I know we're sitting on August. You were telling me, like, as you get towards the end of September, the season's sort of over, right? The lake trout season ends at the end of September. But kind of walk us through the progressions of the season, because I know, like, my buddy Phil has come out with you like in April, I think, and early in the season. When does your season typically start? And then kind of walk us through like some of the fishing locations that you do throughout the year, and where you go to get on these fish all season long.
So right now, midsummer, it's either Minnesota or else going offshore far in Michigan, 40 miles and out more. And then as September comes, the near shore bites pretty good here in Minnesota. And then end of September, it closes. So then we have to transition over to only Michigan. And then it's a lot of far offshore stuff until November. And then once December comes, I come back to Minnesota, and I pretty much fish until ice up. If there is ice up, that's the real question. And then April is probably when we really start up again in Minnesota. And then we stay here till probably mid-May, and then we transition over to Wisconsin for the remainder of May into June, July.
I was really amazed when we'd get into some of these areas, how many lake trout we saw. I thought, because there's times where, I related a lot to fishing Canadian waters where I'll pull in and there'll be 2 or 3 fish on one structure or just off the edge. And you're, I guess relating it to fishing them with a live scope. But we pulled up to spots where there was quite a few where we were able to spot lock and jig these fish in, and they were coming through. Do you find that a lot of these fish are resident fish, or they're more current related, or they're just always on the move?
I think it's a share of current related and then fish on the move. They're following the food. Like right now, with all the guide trips I've been running lately, the fish are stacked full of smelt. And a lot of them come up with smelt in the throat. So you can assume they're just chasing those smelt through the current. And we're right on that current seam. We're just basically looking like a smelt that's sitting there on that current break.
Yeah, it's lake trout are they're apex predators, man. And when they want to eat, they want to eat. Some of those fish, the bellies on those lake trout are absolutely impressive. And even the smaller lake trout that you catch, they're aggressive and they fight like crazy. And the fact that you're catching them on fairly light tackle, light rods, you're not reeling them in with a big downrigger rod or pulling them off of a big trolling rod. That's what makes it fun. That's what excites me. Watching Robbie catch fish. I don't even have to catch them, but to watch them on the live scope come up, chow a bait, and then watch Robbie catch it. I mean, it was like I caught it. I didn't even have to catch that fish. That's how much fun it was. And to see how those lake trout react, I mean, that was the best part about my day, coming out here and kind of seeing how you're doing things, but the way that you hunt them down is not a whole lot different than what I do guiding day in and day out. And that's hunting down fish, finding these aggressive ones. Even when we got into spots where we dropped down, you could tell the mood of the fish. They weren't biting. You're like, reel up. We're going to the next spot. And you're just constantly chasing those fish. I love the fact that you're aggressive like that, because that's how I like to fish, man. That is my fishing in a nutshell. Like, I tell people a lot, ice fishing, for example. If I drill 100 holes and we get in there and those fish aren't biting, I don't care if there's 200 fish there. If they're not biting, they're not biting. We're going to the next spot, and I get after it. I do the same thing in my boat, and that's what I love about using forward-facing sonar. It is such a cool experience. Ethan, thank you so much for jumping on the podcast with us. Thanks for taking us fishing. It was a blast. If anybody wants to get a hold of you, what's the best route to get a hold of you at Lake Superior Jigging?
The best way is Facebook or text us at 218-330-4135.
You're going to want to follow Ethan on Lake Superior Jigging on his Facebook page, also Instagram. If you watch a lot of Instagram reels, Facebook videos, you'll see Ethan. He's always on fish. Dude, thank you so much. We had an absolute blast today. Hey, stay tuned. We got more Dialed In Angling coming your way.
Man Trap Lodge, a Park Rapids resort on beautiful Big Man Trap Lake. Features 16 decked-out private cabins with air conditioning, Wi-Fi, and a rare Northwood swimming pool. Cabins are available with 1 to 5 bedroom units to select from. Whether you're looking for a fishing trip, a family vacation, or a family reunion, Man Trap Lodge is the Park Rapids resort for you. Rent one of our fishing boats for a great day of fishing or a pontoon to cruise around the lake and relax. Man Trap Lodge is a truly magical Minnesota vacation spot that's fun for the whole family. Don't miss your chance to book your late summer or fall trip at Man Trap Lodge for some fantastic fishing. Check us out at mantraplodge.com.
Watertown, South Dakota is your hub for year-round fishing in the heart of the Glacial Lakes region. With Lakes Kempeska and Pelican right in town and dozens more just a short drive away, you'll find non-stop action for walleye, perch, and pike, just to name a few. When you're off the water, explore the Terry Redland Art Center, Bramble Park Zoo, and many other great museums. Plus, award-winning pizza and family-friendly fun around every corner. Easy to reach, hard to leave. Plan your next cast at visitwatertownsd.com. So much Watertown, so little time.
Okay, for the final segment of our podcast, I'm sitting here with my son, Robbie Roach. Dude, what an experience. That was fun.
Yeah.
First of all, I want to thank Ethan for carving out some time to take us fishing, and then also for jumping on the podcast. I know he's a busy guy. We got done fishing. He's tired. He's been on the water for I don't know how many days in a row. So I really, really appreciate Ethan jumping on the podcast with us. And what a cool experience coming up to Lake Superior and fishing the way we did, not just jigging for lake trout, but just catching them and being on Lake Superior. Man, it makes me want to get back there so bad. I don't know about you, but that's all I can think about now. Ever since we got off the water, like I want to go back up there, fish with Ethan again. I want to stay in touch with Ethan. Even just being on Lake Superior again really kind of makes me start to think about different fishing experiences. So like I said earlier in the podcast, I mean, if you want to get up to Lake Superior, there's a ton of great charters on the North Shore, South Shore. There's people that are excellent at trolling. And then there's guys like Ethan that get after them jigging. It was super fun. It was a really cool, unique experience. And for me, I absolutely love jigging for lake trout. Robbie, this was your first experience jigging for lake trout. I know you've trolled with me in Canada and we've caught them. What did you think, man?
It blew me away. Right away. I didn't expect it to be so fun. I watched like YouTube videos building up to it. I've never been on Lake Superior, and first charter going out there, caught a bunch of lake trout, and it blew me away, and hopefully it didn't spoil me for the next time we go out there.
It's sort of like shooting a big buck the first time you go out fishing, right? I mean, we were whomping on them. We absolutely crushed them with Ethan, and he knows that body of water. It was amazing to me, how many different locations he goes on Lake Superior, from the state of Michigan to Wisconsin to Minnesota South Shore, Minnesota North Shore. I mean, he's all over the place. He's all over the map. He runs offshore locations. He fishes inshore locations. I saw his map. I know he does a lot of auto charting. So, he spends a ton of time in all those different areas. And for him to develop this business where, he basically came up there, went out with the charter, fell in love with Lake Superior, and was like, okay, I know what I want to do. And then just sort of navigate to where he's gotten to now, where he, started jigging on 2D sonar, which you can still do. I mean, if there's anglers out there that, have any sort of decent boat with decent safety equipment, I don't recommend people going out on a 16-foot boat. I mean, we saw some people with smaller watercrafts out there, but Lake Superior can be an absolute beast, right? I mean, but if you are thinking about fishing Lake Superior, you can do it in a smaller boat if it's calm and you're watching the weather. And with 2D sonar, you can just vertical jig these things and catch them. I mean, I was surprised how many fish we saw. I said it with Ethan, but I mean, we pull up to spots and how many lake trout we saw on forward-facing sonar, but how many we saw even on his 2D sonar. And that bodes well for the health of that fishery. Earlier in the podcast, I was talking about the smelt population and the smelting this spring and how many people were smelting on Lake Superior again and having really good success with that amount of bait in the lake. And we saw cohos on the screen. We saw lake trout. It's crazy how good of fishing Lake Superior has gotten to be once again. Because I know, like back in the day, I know Lake Superior was incredible, but there was a time period when I was a kid where it was like Lake Superior wasn't that great at fishing, right? We always went to Lake Michigan because they had the king salmon and these giant browns, and the steelhead fishing was better and the coho fishing was better. Lake Superior has really come on strong as of late. So if you're venturing to Lake Superior, or you have an idea that, you want to get up there, I would highly recommend calling Ethan at Lake Superior Jigging, or get a hold of another charter. If you're venturing up the North Shore, Visit Cook County, sponsors this particular show. I have plans of getting up to Cook County as quickly as possible now after fishing with Ethan and bringing my own boat. But I also want to hit up some charters up there because I know how good the fishing is. What do you think, as an overall first experience out there? I mean, I know we pounded the fish. I let you catch a lot of the first, you probably boated the first 15 or so because I was just watching the graph and watching Robbie pound them. But like, I was blown away with how many fish we saw on his graph, not just on his forward facing sonar, but what we saw on 2D as well.
Yeah, it blew me away. I figured pulling up the spots, drop down, maybe you get a couple to come through, maybe you get one to chase it, maybe get one, but spots where there was fish, they were constantly moving through. They're like consistently cruising these areas and you're getting action. And it blew me away how many fish that we saw. And scanning around, you could see all the salmon up higher. And it was crazy how many fish were out there.
Yeah, it was awesome. And that's the thing is like hiring a guide or going out with a charter captain is going to shorten that learning curve. And now that we've gone out with Ethan, like it's really revitalized me to fishing Lake Superior. I want to fish the South Shore. I want to go over to Michigan with Ethan and try that. I want to get up to Isle Royal. I want to go out of, Grand Marais and fish out in front there. I want, I work down the North Shore. I will definitely be back on Lake Superior as quickly as possible. I can't wait to get out there. I can't wait to do it with you and try it in my own boat now that we've gone out there. But that's why I hire guides when we go somewhere. It's just like I talked about earlier in the podcast. It's going out like on saltwater, for example. The first time I went out there casting saltwater, I had no idea. Now I would feel totally comfortable driving my Lund boat down to Louisiana and catching redfish, or bringing my boat down to, Florida, for example. I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to trailer my boat. I'd rather hire a guy. But I'm just saying, like, I wouldn't mind, bringing my boat down there fishing snook. I would know how to do it because I've done it so many times with other charter captains, how they play the current, they know the spots, and just watching Ethan, how he operates. After doing that one time, I was just like blown away. And that dude's really dialed in. I mean, him just talking about fishing in Michigan and doing some offshore stuff and going after big fish at certain times a year and how he goes about his business from April all the way to December was really intriguing to me. And just think, he kind of carved that out himself. I can think back of when I first started guiding, right? I started on Lake of the Woods, but when I started my business on Mille Lacs, I had certain spots, but I really had to put in time fishing on my own, not getting paid, to figure out that lake, right? And back then, I mean, mapping technology was just sort of coming on board. I didn't have maps on my boat. I had GPS. And so I had to do sort of that same thing. And now I'm not relating Mille Lacs to Lake Superior. I mean, you're talking apples to oranges as far as the size of body of water, but just sort of figuring everything out on your own. I know Ethan has put in a ton of time where he wasn't guiding, wasn't getting paid, just going out there for the love of fishing to build up his knowledge on that lake before he is able to start running a charter business. And I could relate to him all the way. We had a great time in the boat talking about fishing. He's a fish head like us. And just seeing how he's developed as a guide and how he's developed this whole sort of category of jigging on Lake Superior for himself and carved out a niche, I think is super cool, because I can totally relate. When I first started guiding, I sort of had to carve out my niche. I remember going out on Mille Lacs, in the winter, I didn't really know where the fish were other than, on the edges of mud flats or gravel bars, but I needed to find fish and catch fish all day long. And so I just got after it. And I see Ethan doing that. He was telling us about it in the boat, how his passion just fueled him to become the angler that he is. And I love seeing that passion out of anyone, because Robbie, I know you and I share that same passion. We have that fuel and that desire that once we do something, we're fired up about it.
Yeah, for sure. I learned a whole ton too. Like we've caught lake trout before trolling, and we've never done jigging, and doing this jigging was so fun because it's so deep. You're dropping all the way down. You're watching your bait go all the way down. And when those fish come in, a lot of them, you can tell their mood right away. Some are like lazy and they just roll through and be like, oh, that one's just going to come through. And then other ones come firing up and you start reeling and they chase it and they just grab it. It's so fun. And it's just crazy. It's so much different fishing than I've ever done. Like I've never done that deep of fishing. And it was just amazing to me. I learned so much going out on the boat and learning all the techniques. And
yeah, just the way, he's jigging his baits and stuff. I mean, because I can think in Canada, like I would fish like blade style baits, jig wraps, tubes, and I fish paddle tails, and, just seeing how different fish react to, let's say, 2D sonar versus forward facing sonar. And you could certainly get away with fishing 2D sonar. I mean, I did it for years on my trolling motor in the summer. And then of course in the winter, dropping the Markham down and watching those fish chase. But that's what's always been intriguing for me, lake trout fishing. I've always loved catching them vertical jigging like that. It just, from the first time I caught a lake trout in Canada to today. And what's cool about Lake Superior and the North Shore in particular in Minnesota, it's not that far away, right? I mean, even from the Twin Cities, you can be up the North Shore in a matter of hours. It's so close to home. And yet, I think for a lot of people, they're intimidated by Lake Superior, kind of like I've been most of my life. I said, I was talking earlier in the podcast about fishing the St. Louis River as a kid, fishing kind of the South Shore, a little bit up on the North Shore with, your grandpa and grandma when they had their boat up out of Two Harbors. But I mean, I dabbled in it, but this really gets me fired up, gives me confidence that, I can come up there. And really, I'm going to recommend a lot of people to a lot of the different charters that are on Lake Superior, just because I'm blown away with how good the fishery actually is. So, well, Rob, let's wrap this baby up. I know both of us are tired. We caught a pile of fish today. We had a great experience. I was blown away, but definitely exceeded my expectations as far as what we were going to catch. We didn't keep any fish. No, that's fine. I mean, if people want to keep a few small lake trout, I think Ethan's cool with that. Most of the charter captains are. Highly recommend dumping these big fish back in. I want to see this fishery flourish for a long time, and I'm always respectful of any resource. And just the manner of how Ethan was releasing the fish when we were at the end, we didn't boat every fish and take a picture of every fish. We took a picture of a couple big ones. We released, most of them never even came out of the water. The fact that a lot of the fish strikes that we had were up in the water column. These fish were chasing all over the place. They're burping up their air in them. And we watched those fish go back down to the bottom. I was blown away with the entire operation. Still am super enamored. Highly recommend anyone listening to this to get out to Lake Superior, look up a charter, even a trolling charter. Those guys are chasing salmon and lake trout and steelhead. Ever since we've been talking about this trip, I've been following not only Ethan on Instagram, but I've also been following some other Lake Superior charters, and they're getting after it. They're actually catching a lot of fish, and I'm blown away. Lake Superior will be a destination of mine year after year, if not multiple times a year after doing this trip. So, Robbie, thanks again for coming with me, buddy. You're always my wingman on these adventures. You just have to set time in your schedule and get after and do it. And that's exactly what we did. We conquered Lake Superior, but that's all I'm going to be thinking about now because I definitely want to get back up there. So thanks for tuning into the podcast. We appreciate everybody listening each and every week. We'll have more Dialed In Angling podcasts next week. We've got some more adventures we're going to do. I'm going to take a few days off here and do some fishing with Robbie. I know you start football soon, so your fishing adventures, at least during the week, are going to come to a halt here. School's not that far away. August is here. Fall is on the doorstep. So anyone listening, you got to take advantage of these bites while they're here. Take advantage of summer while it's here because it's going to go fast. So until next week, I'm Tony Roach. This has been the Dialed In Angling Podcast.